All right, good evening, everyone. Hopefully you all can see and hear me okay. My name is Abby Keller. I'm the wolf care specialist here at the International Wolf Center. I am joined by our wolf curator, Giselle, and welcome to our What's for Dinner program for the kind of wintertime What's for Dinner. I believe this is our second to last wolf care webinar for the year. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you for all of those who have joined our subscription for the webinar throughout the whole year. So first I'm going to talk about a little, let me see, there we go. So here's a plan for tonight's webinar. We're going to start off by talking a bit about some pack updates, as well as a little bit about some feeding behaviors that we have seen recently. Not just about wolves in general, but also about wolves in our own pack here, our ambassador wolves. And then we'll be watching the live cameras while a deer carcass is wheeled out. This is a weekly program that we do for the folks that come and visit us in Ely, Minnesota, at our interpretive center. It's called What's for Dinner, so very similar to what you'll be watching tonight, but it's a little bit more focused on the ecology side of things, whereas this will be a little bit more focused on kind of our own pack and a little bit about updates with that. And then we will end with a Q&A while we watch the live cams. Giselle and I will talk a little bit about the behaviors that we see as we are watching the live cameras and kind of observing what our wolves are doing. Hopefully we can kind of explain to you some of those behaviors. And then we will also answer any questions that you guys have regarding anything that you're seeing or any questions about our wolf pack in general, wolves in general. We're happy to answer anything you have. So please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A tab on the Zoom webinar functions. That's kind of the easiest place for us to be able to find it, and then we can mark it as answered or read as we kind of go along, so we don't kind of duplicate questions. That'd be really helpful. We'll have plenty of time to answer your questions, so please feel free to put whatever comes to mind in the chat. We'd be happy to answer. So with that being said, we only have a little bit of time before the actual carcass, the deer carcass, gets wheeled out. That is what they're getting tonight, is deer. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by doing a little bit of a pack update. So hopefully my video plays okay, and hopefully you can hear it okay. So we've been getting a little bit of snow. You know, winter is definitely here, even though it's still technically, you know, fall. Winter doesn't actually start until the 21st of December, but we're not too far away. We've already started to shovel snow and kind of clear snow off the roofs, and the wolves have definitely recognized it as winter as well. So we've started to see a little bit of increased activity as kind of the temperatures fall, so increased eating. A lot more feedings have been taking place these past couple of weeks, as well as increased just activity in general within the pack. So some of that is dominance and posturing behavior, but some of that is more social behavior as well. So here's Axel doing a little bit of social interaction with Rika and Blackstone. You can see he's doing a little bit of licking and yawning, ears turned to the side a little bit, maybe a little intimidated by having both Rika and Blackstone follow him around, but he kind of still continues on with a bit of a kind of a hoppy, bouncy step, which lets me know that it's a bit more of a social behavior. So we've also been seeing quite a bit of continued submission from the yearlings. So Kaz and Blackstone, born just last spring, or I guess a little more than last spring, 18 months ago, I guess. They're still showing very submissive behaviors to the Arctics. You can see a lot of that kind of muzzle licking, a lot of kind of putting their body low to the ground, whereas the Arctics are going to kind of stand over them a little bit. Axel with a very high tail, kind of wagging a bit in excitement. A little bit of corrective behaviors there, some snarling, some snapping, kind of just getting in their face saying, hey, you're being a little bit obnoxious to the yearlings when they're getting a little bit too enthusiastic with their submissions. But you're seeing kind of those sweeping tail wags. You can see a little bit of a tighter tail wag on Blackstone there. And then Kaz does a little bit of a tight tail wag too. a little bit of that is kind of saying, you know, should I stay? Should I go? You know, they want to greet, they want to kind of show those appeasement behaviors to the adults, to the Arctics, but it can be a little intimidating, especially when the Arctics are kind of saying, hey, quit it, you're kind of bugging me. So you'll definitely see that still kind of take place. We were definitely a little cautious this winter. We were hoping that the yearlings didn't start to test the Arctics quite yet, and it doesn't look like we're starting to see that at all. So a lot of it will depend on what Rika and the other Arctic brother does during those interactions, but so far it looks like it's going to be a little bit calmer than we had anticipated. So we've also been seeing Grayson kind of take a little bit more of a lead, I guess, in the last couple of feedings. Those of you who have seen our What's for Dinner program before or who have watched the live cameras have probably remembered that Grayson isn't super into the carcass usually. A lot of times he'll hang out on top of the pump house, so that's kind of the structure where Rika's walking down from in this video. He'll just kind of sit up there and wait for the yearlings and Rika and Axel to kind of be done with the carcass before he goes in and takes his fill. He's kind of a no conflict wolf. He's usually not the one to kind of seek out conflict, so a lot of times he'll just say, all right, I'll walk off and let these young ones eat it first, and then I'll come in afterwards. But we've started to see him be a little bit more of a focal point during our feedings. So you can see a little bit of a lip curl towards Rika there before she walked around to the head. And he's definitely kind of keeping an eye on the yearlings, although he's not chasing them off the carcass or anything like that. He's still very kind of timid, I would say, in that way, a little less willing to chase another wolf off if they are already there. However, if he's guarding something that he's been on for a while, for example, if he got to the carcass and was there for a little bit and then Kaz came over, he'd probably chase him off. And I have a few clips that kind of demonstrate that as well. But you can see a lot more kind of activity on the carcass than he normally would. There's Axel walking around behind Grayson with a little bit of a lip curl, a little bit of a snarl, and a direct stare, kind of keeping an eye on what Axel's doing, trying to get him to back off a little bit from the carcass. And Axel does listen. He does kind of take the hint, and he says, all right, I'll back off. I'll go take one of these other deer legs that they had spread out for us. So that's kind of what we've been seeing there. You saw Grayson do a little bit of a snap towards Blackstone. It'll be interesting to see tonight's feeding, if that's a trend that continues. Here's another feeding that we did. This was a midweek feeding, so not one of our weekend feedings, but one that was on Wednesday. And we usually do those a little bit earlier in the day, just because we know we don't really keep staff around all night. So this was a little bit earlier. That's why it's a little lighter out. And these were actually a couple of beaver that were fed out. So we get beaver from local trappers. They'll trap the beaver, and most of them usually take the hides and sell the hides. And then we'll buy the carcasses off them for a little bit of money. And then it's a really great food source for the wolves, you know, keeps them fed, and it also kind of utilizes the whole part of the animal that is being taken. But we also get beavers that are donated by wildlife services, if they were nuisance beaver, or just people who enjoy trapping. So they also will eat not just kind of the whole carcasses that we feed out, they also eat kind of every little bit of the carcass that is out there. So the spine, you know, the leg bones, anything that has a little bit of meat on it, but even just the bone itself, they'll eat, as well as the hide. A lot of times eating that bone is going to give them a lot of calcium. There's a lot of really good marrow in that bone. It's going to be a really high fat content, and that's really beneficial for them, especially in colder months. And then the hide that they're eating with that is actually going to help them be able to pass that bone in their system without any issue. So, you know, imagine eating sharp, pokey bones, you know, that probably wouldn't go through your system very well. But when you're eating a hide with it, that hair is going to wrap around the bone in the system and going to help pass through the intestines without kind of scraping it up or doing any damage. So that's why it's really important for them to have kind of a whole prey diet and not just kind of raw meat. There's a lot of components in a carcass that, we don't really think about, but are really important for an animal like the wolf. So this is kind of an interesting clip, I thought. This is Grayson showing a little bit more of that food possession and food dominance that he's not usually one to really show. And this is Kaz kind of taking the other end of a carcass. But like I said, we do leave the carcasses in for a little bit, usually not longer than a week. We usually like to take out the old carcass before we put in a new one. But here we have Grayson and Kaz doing a little bit of a tug of war. Not something that we tend to see Grayson do. A lot of times we'll see Blackstone, who just joined, we'll see Blackstone and Kaz do tug of wars, but Grayson's usually not involved during that. So this was kind of an interesting capture for us. As you can see, things get a little bit more intense as the other wolves join in. Definitely Rika still kind of targets wolves from behind a little bit. Usually Grayson is kind of the one that she focuses on the most, although she has been seen going after Blackstone and Axel a little bit. For the most part, she leaves Kaz alone, but she's definitely kind of making her presence known with the other three. So you can see Grayson, he kind of got the better part of that carcass there, while Kaz and Blackstone kind of do some submissive posturing to Axel, who has a pretty high raised tail there. A lot of excitement kind of during that interaction. Another thing we watch for during something like this would be kind of tension between the two Arctic brothers, so between Axel and Grayson. If it were to escalate into something that was, a little bit more intense, we may throw out, a distraction to kind of give them something else to focus on. But the majority of interactions that are food related tend to be not a huge deal and usually not something that we want to get involved in. It's really important for the pack to be able to sort that out. And it's also important to note that pack hierarchy and kind of social structure when it comes to like dominance is kind of a separate thing compared to kind of food possession. So kind of what I mean by that is that a wolf like Blackstone, who is pretty low on the rank order, he has just as much right and ability to guard and defend food from another wolf as a more dominant member of the pack like Axel or Grayson. So kind of no matter what your social status is in the pack rank order, each wolf has its own ability and right to defend that food, because it's all about survival at the end of the day. The wolves that get fed, survive, and the wolves that don't. So here we're seeing Grayson doing some more guarding. This is Kaz again that he's kind of guarding from. Grayson had cached I believe it was a bison hide in the sand there. So even though we can't see it, it's really important for us to know as care staff where they're caching things. Sometimes you just can't know because you can't have eyes on them 24/7, but it's definitely important for us to know where to kind of maybe leave alone. We have to watch the wolves' behavior, and if they seem like they're kind of not too comfortable with us walking in a certain area, then maybe we step back and we kind of reevaluate our intentions there. So you can see Rika kind of getting a little ramped up, Axel getting a little ramped up too. Blackstone's digging a hole. He's not really part of the excitement going on there. He's mostly looking for Kaz. He saw that Kaz was on the ground and he was kind of taking that. This is kind of another interesting instance. This is Grayson telling Rika that enough is enough. This was after she was kind of targeting his rear a little bit. So he chased her off. You can see Axel and Blackstone both kind of joining in on this little focus towards Rika. She's not super comfortable with that. You saw a pretty low tail from her. There's Grayson chasing her back into the woods. You'll see a little bit of a tail wag from her, but it's a really tight, low tail wag. Again, that's kind of that, should I stay, should I go? I'm not really sure if I should stick around for this confrontation or not. And so it's kind of a intimidated posture from her. She does a little bit of a invite chase, seeing if she can kind of make it a little bit more of a social situation. Grayson's not having it. He has that high T2 tail, and he's definitely keeping that direct stare on her, following her around and whatnot. So that just goes to show that, you know, each interaction is goes day by day here, moment by moment. You saw Rika do a little bit of a mark near a carcass part, and there's Grayson doing a bit of a scrape, a pretty prolonged scrape over that mark, kind of reestablishing a little bit of kind of scent over her scent. So that's called an overmark behavior. We've been noticing him do that quite a bit. Even things like raised leg urinations or RLUs. He's been overmarking a lot of the wolves in the pack, but especially Rika. A lot of times we'll see Kaz come over and do an RLU as well, or sometimes Axel even, but it seems to be a pretty common Rika Grayson thing over the past few days at least, or the past weeks. So you can see a lot of these videos kind of alternate between snow and no snow. We've had quite a bit of variation in the weather. We had quite a bit of snow kind of around October, and then it all melted. We had a few weeks where it was a little warmer, kind of like in the 50s, and all that melted. And then we're back to snow now, although it got a little warmer again, and a lot of that snow melted again. So you'll kind of see a little bit of snow, no snow until we actually get a big heavy storm and some real cold temperatures. Axel is doing really well. For those of you who have kind of been following us for a while, you may know that Axel was diagnosed with sebaceous adenitis. It's a skin condition, and he was diagnosed earlier this spring. Basically, it was kind of drying out his skin to the point his body wasn't able to produce that natural oils, the natural sebum that bodies are supposed to produce to keep the skin conditioned and the hair healthy. So a lot of his hair was breaking off, becoming really brittle, and just was overall not very good coat condition. And we were really worried for him for this winter. Obviously it's hard to be an animal that lives outside and not have a very good or very dense coat. So we really wanted to make sure that he was doing well, especially before this winter. And so he's been on oral and topical treatments all throughout the summer and fall. And as you can see in these videos, he's probably the fluffiest wolf in here. He definitely has his nice thick coat back. Feels really great, good condition, soft, no breakage, no kind of brittle hair or anything like that. So he's doing really well in that regard. So I'm going to switch over to our web cameras, and I can show you a couple more updates that we have, although these will be kind of more facility updates. So again, for those of you who have watched our webcams or have seen some of our webinars before, this is a pretty familiar view. This is our exhibit pack camera. So you can see I'm kind of moving it around. That's what we call a pan tilt zoom camera. So I can pan it around, I can tilt it, I can zoom in on things. If you were logged in a little earlier, I had it zoomed in on this rock where Kaz was sleeping, or resting, I should say. And then this is going to be where we're dumping the deer, this kind of bright spot right there. But we actually had some new cameras installed as well. So the one I'm going to show right now is called the enrichment window camera, because this is actually where we throw out our enrichment during the summertime is usually when we kind of focus our enrichment efforts, although we do it in the winter as well. So the kind of benefit of having this one is that we can see under the eaves here. This is a really popular spot for the wolves to kind of hang out, especially during times of inclement weather. So if it's really rainy or snowy, a lot of times they'll take shelter underneath these eaves here. We keep some hay or some cedar chips there to kind of keep it nice and comfortable for them. We can also see this back den, which one of the yearlings is walking up. I think that's Blackstone there. So we can zoom in pretty far, actually. We can almost see inside the den, just the way that the camera is angled. We can't quite see in there. And then you can kind of see some legs of another wolf up there. Looks like Rika and Kaz walking around. So this has been really, really helpful for us to be able to kind of keep an eye on what the wolves are up to. I'm really excited to kind of see the enrichment side of things when we start doing kind of more usual or more frequent enrichments during the summertime. We're going to be able to kind of monitor their reactions to different enrichments kind of in a new close-up way. This is also kind of a fun view. This is the slate den. Not a lot of people actually get to see this den, especially during the summertime, because there's a lot of foliage here. And so a lot of times it's kind of blocked by that. But you can see up there, there's Blackstone sitting on top. And during the day, you can get a really good view of who's up there. So this is a really great view to have just to see who's resting where, you know, where the action is basically. If there is a wolf that sounds like it may need a little bit of help or a distraction, we can tune into these cameras and see if it really is a situation that needs assistance, or if it's, you know, just kind of classic wolf dominance. So I'm seeing a little bit of activity by the fence line over there. I wonder if our wolves are about to come out, or sorry, if our deer is about to come out to be fed to these guys. I might actually switch over to a different camera. This, like I said, is a new camera, so I believe the funding for this came from Give to the Wolves Day. Is that right, Giselle?
Yeah, it was a combination of that and one particular donor that she funded this camera and the transition area camera. Yeah. So thank you for all of those donations and Gift to the Wolves Day, and some of you that also do some individual donations. We're always very grateful that we can add new things for us to continue monitoring and having all these wonderful views to track what's happening in there. Find, you know, not necessarily having to be inside of the enclosure, but definitely. It looks like they are coming in
I
with
was
the
gonna
deer.
say, yeah, it looks like I see some tail wags. I might actually stay on the enrichment window camera since it's in color right now. The black and white is kind of the infrared that turns on when there's not enough light. So in kind of low light conditions, that infrared turns on so we can still see what the wolves are up to without having lights on at night. However, because this is a program that we do in person, you know, we want to make sure that everybody can see it. And definitely later in the season here in winter and fall, it gets dark pretty early out. It was like pitch black by like 4:30 today, so definitely need the lights on today. If you've tuned into the summer What's for Dinner webinar, you might remember it was pretty light out. We didn't need the lights at all, so definitely kind of a difference there. I think you'll also see a little bit of a difference in activity, and maybe even a little bit of difference in intensity with interactions between the wolves. So like I mentioned, oh, sorry, did you have something to say?
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say what you guys did with the deer this week, but you did it, so you can talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a roadkill deer. We get all of our deer from roadkill, some hunter scraps as well. So hunting season in Minnesota was now basically in November. Here's when it started. And what we did was we usually gut the deer, so we take out its stomach and kind of its intestines, the digestive system that the wolves aren't really going to eat too much of. In the wild, they might pick it clean a bit more just because they might be a little bit more desperate for certain resources, but in our experience, it just kind of makes a big mess. It's a lot of kind of vegetative grass material, and wolves don't really eat that. So a lot of times they just kind of throw it around everywhere, and it kind of makes it a bit of a mess. So we usually just take that out. And then today we actually stuffed it with some lard or some beef fat. And so that's what those kind of like white chunks are in there. So a little bit more exciting, a little bit more appetizing. Definitely who doesn't like a big chunk of fat? um, very helpful for winter months when things start to get cold. It's really important for wolves to keep up their energy, keep up their metabolism, because they're burning a lot of energy just surviving, just trying to stay warm. So we always try to make sure that we feed in relation to the weather and to the activity. So that means increased feedings during kind of the colder, more active months of winter. And then usually in the summer, they're not as hungry, so that we can kind of get by with a bit less feedings.
It does look like we have, if we have a space for question here,
Yeah, absolutely.
um, Shana or Shana, hopefully I'm saying your name correctly, is asking if Rika has chosen a pair bond or if she's pair bonded yet. Um, yeah, if you want to take that one, I'll take the next
Sure.
one.
I can do that. Yeah. That's a good question. We've definitely been seeing some favoritism towards Kaz. That's kind of always been the case for her. She seems to focus a little bit more on Blackstone in terms of like dominance. We see her kind of doing a bit more posturing or testing behaviors over Blackstone, whereas with Kaz, she seems to kind of give him a little bit of a pass. We've seen some kind of parallel walking between both her and Grayson and her and Kaz, although that's not always, a surefire indicator of pair bonding. Sometimes that's just, one moment in kind of the snapshot of what the dynamic is at that moment. So, we can't definitively say right now if she's, chosen anybody. It doesn't seem to be the case. She's still very much will kind of target Grayson if there's times of high intensity, high activity, high excitement. But she definitely seems to kind of favor Kaz in a lot of situations. So we'll see if it plays out. Who knows? There's no guarantee she will pair bond. It's happened where, wolves just don't pair bond. In captivity especially, it's not always a guarantee. In the wild, they have the opportunity to disperse to go find another individual. Here they're kind of the pool is very small for choosing. So she may decide not to pair bond, and that's all right. It's not the end of the pack not to have a pair bonded, a dominant male, a dominant female. I think it'll be very interesting to watch throughout these next few months, though. Especially as we get closer to breeding season, which is February. That's usually when we start to see a little bit more intensity in terms of pair bonding behaviors. So we'll watch for things like resting in close proximity, so sleeping next to each other, eating next to each other, just basically spending a lot of time together. Parallel walking is another one that can be pretty common. Mutual grooming, so kind of grooming each other, licking or doing those little like flea bites in each other's fur to kind of keep each other clean. Guarding of each other, kind of being more defensive towards other wolves in interacting with them. Kind of choosing their side, quote unquote, if there's ever any conflict with another wolf. A pair bonded group pair would probably kind of come to each other's defense like that. So yeah, there's a lot of things we'll be watching for. Definitely it'll be very interesting, but she's getting towards 3 years old. That tends to be kind of when we'll start to sexually mature, is between 2 and 3 years old. But who knows? We'll see.
We'll definitely have a lot of work and a lot of
Oh yeah.
observing to do.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, so we have some really good questions coming in. And since I'm seeing a little bit of a lull in the feeding, we can keep asking, and we can also, let's see what we see here going on in case we don't want to miss anything, but we continue to see Kaz and Blackstone feeding and Grayson kind of coming in and out. I'm not sure if I'm seeing them eating lard or just organs, but probably a combination of both. This next question is a really interesting one. They're talking about how there's already a new disease affecting deer, moose, and elk in Yellowstone, a neurological condition called chronic wasting disease. It's already been diagnosed as 100% fatal with no existing vaccine as of yet. My concern is how it can affect wolf populations who feed on these species. How are you planning to counter this? So there's a lot of parts to this question. This is a new disease affecting ungulates in Yellowstone, but it's not new here in the Midwest. And Abby, feel free to interrupt. But I've been living in the Midwest for over a decade now, and I've been hearing about it. And the management, I think it's a little bit more established, and it is here in Minnesota. I think we can share a website where it kind of keeps track and monitors where chronic wasting disease is being found. It's not yet up here in this area of Minnesota, or at least they haven't found any cases up here. But yeah, not new to this area. And it is, like you're saying, very fatal. The thing with the wolf and deer interactions is that disease will make deer more vulnerable, and maybe like an easier prey to a pack of wolves. And some of the theories is that it helps with decreasing the frequency of that, or the number of deer that have the chronic wasting disease. And if there's no concern of it is a prions disease, and when wolves consume the deer, it doesn't really affect them. For some reason, it's just not compatible, so it's not a worry for their health. They can sort of process that through their system and have some of those left in their feces, but not necessarily increased or anything like that. But in terms of if it affects, if it has a huge effect on the ungulate population that they depend on, it could ultimately have an impact on, wolf prey availability. However, yeah, Abby, if you have anything else to add, that's kind of what I want to say. At least for us, is not a concern that it's going to transfer disease to our wolves. But yeah, hopefully that answers that question. And if not, Abby, feel free to add, because I know you maybe you teach wolf and deer ecology or interaction, so feel free to.
No, that was spot on. Yeah. Just to kind of reiterate what Giselle was saying, chronic wasting does not affect deer, or does not affect wolves directly. It's not going to make them sick or ill. So we don't really have to worry about that when we're feeding our deer, that we get the roadkill deer to our wolves. However, we also get deer heads from a local wildlife biologist out of, I want to say it's Leech Lake Reservation.
Yes.
It is. She's great. She's actually here this weekend. She was the one that fed out. But they do chronic wasting disease testing regularly, especially with hunting season going on right now. They have kind of a cooperation with the reservation in the area, as well as locals who are not on the reservation. If they turn in a head, they'll give them $25 for that head, and then they'll actually test the lymph nodes in that head, which is how you can test for chronic wasting disease, to see if that individual is carrying that. And so far there's been, no cases up in her area, although I believe the farthest north it was recorded last year was in Bemidji. So those of you who are kind of familiar with Minnesota, it is kind of a central northern town, not quite as north as Ely, but definitely further north than it had been in the past. So hopefully we don't see that as a trend, and hopefully we don't start to see that move even more north. it definitely can be really, really hard on deer herds, on deer populations, which Giselle mentioned, you know, can then kind of affect wolf populations down the road. So while the wolves may benefit at first by having all of these kind of weaker prey that are easier to catch, it's going to overall decrease deer numbers to a point where it could be an issue for wolves down the road. But I believe there's some really good management of it currently going on, especially with the DNR kind of focusing on harvest numbers, making sure that hunters are willing to you know, bring in their deer and kind of help getting those tested so they can track CWD numbers. Also with people who farm deer for meat purposes, you know, making sure that they're kind of following all of the regulations to kind of ensure that any disease that kind of pops up in their deer herds are not then transmitted to wild populations. So it's definitely a pretty serious thing, but you know, it's not something that's you know, new this year or anything. It's been tracked for a while.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just for whoever is interested, I posted in the chat a link that sort of, if you're interested in looking more into it, it shows how Minnesota manages it and what zones, specific zones are more affected or more in like this red zone for CWD. So yeah, if you want to look into it, I'm sure other states might have a similar thing too. Yeah, so thank you. See what we continue to see here, but we have more questions if we want to keep taking them.
That sounds great. Yeah, I was just
Yeah,
gonna point
some,
out,
yeah.
Axel's eating, I think it's liver is what he's pulled out, either liver or heart. You can see him kind of chewing with the side of his mouth, his carnasials. If you were watching our YouTube short this week, we kind of talked a little bit about how you know, wolves use that to kind of shred and break bones, and very important part of their dentition. So just wanted to point that out. He did a little bit of a head shake with it too. So it's where they kind of grab it and shake it with their head. A lot of times that's kind of a killing move. So if they catch smaller prey, they'll kind of do a little bit of a head shake to kind of, you know, dispatch it rather quickly. But they can also do it to kind of loosen the meat and kind of make it easier to chew and kind of get down. So, and I believe that's Kaz on the other side. It's a little hard to tell in this lighting. I'm pretty sure it's Kaz. I might actually switch to a different camera here just so we can kind of get another perspective on what's going on. And you may have also noticed they dragged the deer quite a bit of ways. There's a good chance they'll drag it right back and then drag it out another way and then drag it right back and then drag it somewhere else. Very rarely does a carcass or a fresh kill ever stay in one spot. In fact, if you ever kind of come across a fresh wolf kill, oh, there's some scent rolling going on there. If you ever come across a fresh wolf kill, you'll kind of see it spread out in kind of like a star pattern where it has kind of one big center where like the kill actually happened. That's usually where it's kind of the bloodiest. And then they'll drag the carcass in different directions, kind of making this little map or a little star of kind of remnants of where they were bringing that carcass. So just kind of a fun fact if you ever are walking around and you see a fresh wolf kill or what you think might be a fresh wolf kill, that might be what you're seeing. And then this looks like a chunk of fur maybe that Kaz has. He's doing some plucking behaviors and then a scent roll there. It's not 100% known why wolves scent roll, but kind of the working theory as to why they might do that is to kind of pick up an odor that is a little more unique that maybe they're not super used to, or maybe the odor of a carcass or something that they want to bring back to their pack, and either, you know, rub it all over their body so they can bring it back and say, hey, you know, smell this cool smell that I found, and maybe even lead them back to, you know, the carcass that they found that they can scavenge off of. Or maybe it's just to, you know, scent mark and kind of say, hey, this is my part of the carcass, and kind of spread their scent that way. So we definitely see a lot of scent rolling in our pack, especially with Kaz, Blackstone. They seem to be a bit more willing to scent roll. Rika doesn't really do it all that often, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, just kind of wanted to point those out as we saw them. But yeah, I think we can get back to questions here.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. Well, that
Yeah,
was
absolutely.
great additional information, and yeah, we want to see those behaviors. Um, I think we talked a little bit about it, but Shanna's asking which ranks are the wolves leaning towards.
Mm,
Um, we briefly mentioned how Blackstone is sort of leaning towards the bottom, or yeah, the bottom rank order. The Arctics, pretty much on in the top. I think the yearlings still respect them and submit very well to them, or um, on a very regular basis. They're very respectful of them, and they're still sort of yeah, showing that dominance. And Rika, it's kind of, I think, I don't know, in this, Abby, I don't know what your take is, but to me it seems like she's kind of like in this in between, and
yeah.
she sort of tests a little bit more the Arctics, especially, that the whole Grayson thing. And sometimes she seems, yeah, again, these pack dynamics are not static at all, and we always see so many different things going on,
Hmm.
and things can change so quickly. um but yeah, that's sort of like a little bit of my interpretation between them.
Hmm.
And with Axel and Grayson, I don't know that I see something clear. Definitely the yearlings seem to see him like a little bit as a leader, or as that wolf to go to, but they still also do a lot of submissive behavior to Axel as well. Um, but yeah, I don't know what you would say about Rika.
Oh, Rika, Rika, Rika. Yeah. um, no, to be fair, a lot of times wolves will kind of have different pack kind of like rank orders when it comes to like the different sexes in the pack. So males have their own rank order, females will have their own. So it's a little bit interesting with Rika because she's the only female. She doesn't really have that other female to kind of um have those moments of genuine kind of testing for rank. A lot of her interactions are with males where she's like, maybe I should test for rank. I don't know what's going on in her head, of course, but um I can only imagine that might be a little bit kind of confusing for her, or maybe a little bit empowering for her even. Maybe she doesn't feel the need to have to really do all that much dominance, because we don't really see her do too much dominating other than kind of going after Grayson when he's kind of more excitable, or when other wolves are more excitable as well. So it's interesting for sure. And then also how she was kind of raised may play a role in that too. She didn't have any siblings or litter mates growing up. She was a singleton. She, was born without any other siblings, any brothers or sisters. So a lot of her interactions at a young age was with humans, or even with like domesticated dogs. And clearly we all have very different interactions than two wolves would have. So, maybe some of that might have been a little bit um interesting in her development, in terms of kind of how it has shaped her ability to interact face to face with other wolves, and kind of that confidence that she has, or lack of confidence, I could say even. We definitely see her seeking kind of areas of elevation when she gets a little bit more intimidated, or when more than one wolf is focused on her. She seems to get a little bit more anxious and stressed out pretty like quickly, even though it doesn't happen often. When it does happen, she's up on a stump, she's lip curling, she's tucking her tail, she looks pretty uncomfortable. So she may just not be used to that sort of attention quite yet. So definitely you know, like Giselle was talking about, it's not static. It's always ever changing. Um, but yeah, no, I think that was a great assessment of who's fallen where within the pack so far, that we can kind of tell.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, I forget, she's our female and she's just kind of like the by default the
Yeah,
dominant female and she doesn't have like that pressure.
she's in a unique situation, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. She definitely, yeah. Um, I have another question here from Lexi,
Lexi.
saying, so interesting to see Grayson's attitude towards the carcass switching up a bit.
Mhm.
This question isn't necessarily about food, but I'm curious if there's been trends in the pack's resting spaces at night. Also, the new camera view is so amazing. Thank you. um, yeah, I mean, I think just this past week, I don't know, this wasn't really at night. It was while I was at work. I I noticed I've noticed like Kaz and Grayson resting pretty close up together in the slate den. Um, Axel also kind of spending some time resting in the pump house with Blackstone. I often, kind of see them, Kaz and Blackstone together. And Rika spends a lot of time in the den, but that's just been kind of lately. And at night, I haven't really. I don't know if you've noticed since you are there a little bit later, like today. I don't know if you've noticed anything, but um, yeah. And for those of you who don't know, this is a really important um, question. And I guess I don't know if the resting spaces you're meaning by the location of resting or just like the proximity of resting with each other. I kind of answered it that way, but that resting proximity is kind of it tends to be this indicator of like social bonds or um, close associations and so that's something that we like to look at who's resting next to who and how many times we're seeing that sort of trend. But in terms of specific locations, at night, I think like towards the den, under the eaves, um, pump house, I think it's a pretty also common one on top of the pump house. And all of these places, when we look at it, we have hay for them during the winter that helps with giving them a little bit, a lot of people say they don't really need hay, right? They're wolves, but we're trying to give them the best life we can while they're in under our care. So we try to offer those warm, cozy spaces for them to take refuge when temperatures really drop here, or just giving them that comfort. But all of those spaces, they really enjoy. And later on, when temperatures really drop, we try to find, all right, where's the sun hitting around the enclosure during the day? So we can put some hay there and they really use those spaces to take
Mhm.
advantage of that warmth when it's really, really cold. Like in front of the exhibit windows. We haven't done it yet because it's not that cold,
Mhm.
but maybe later in January when it gets below zero, then we'll add some hay because it gets some really good sunlight when it's really, really cold and they really like those spots. But yeah, feel free to add anything that you might have noticed, Abby, or that I missed.
Yeah, no, that's I would agree with all of that. I think that's Rika that just yep, that's Rika that just came up and took a big chunk of fat, bringing it somewhere where we will not see her eat it, I'm sure. She does this thing where she likes to put food on, we always call it her table. It's usually like a little stump, and she'll kind of eat off of that rather than eating off the ground. I don't know where she picked that up from, but it's it's something we see her do a lot. Although it kind of looks like she might be caching it back there. I don't know if you can see on
Yeah.
camera very well, but I see a little bit of some tail movement and maybe some
Mm-hmm.
digging
Yep.
perhaps.
Yeah, you're
Um,
right.
Oh, it's like focusing on the branch. Um, but yeah, so a lot of times wolves will do that where they kind of cache and kind of store food for later,
Mhm.
basically burying it and to keep it out of scavengers, to kind of hide it from maybe other pack mates, perhaps. Um, the rate of how many they actually go back to, I'm not 100% sure. We've definitely seen our wolves go back to caches that they've cached or go to another wolf's cache, but it seems to be pretty effective in keeping scavengers off of their food. There she is. Um, I see another question here from Keith. It says, a week or so ago in a pack rally, Blackstone was the subject of some focus, but it then switched to Kaz, who was assuming the low rank role for a spell. Would that be more common or rare? Or may I could have mistaken identity? That's a good question. It's pretty common, I would say. Pack dynamics are very fluid. They're always kind of changing. Just because you're, you know, overall kind of the lower ranking pack member doesn't mean that focus won't switch to another pack member who's also, lower on the rank, even if they're not the lowest. And wolves are also very opportunistic. So a lot of times if they see one wolf kind of being targeted or focused on, they may join in because that's their opportunity to kind of gain a little bit of status or gain rank. So kind of an example of that would be when Rika is rolled over. Oh, there she's doing some caching. When Rika rolls over, whether it's for, she wants to greet staff. Oh, we got double caching going on. That's exciting. Whether she wants to greet staff or if she's just rolling around on her back for some reason, Blackstone will often run right to her and start to either do standovers or try to sit on her in what we call a squash behavior. Both of those are kind of more kind of dominance, kind of testing behaviors. And so he's definitely seen that she's in that kind of more vulnerable position because obviously when you're on your back, you can't really defend yourself or kind of protect yourself in the way you could if you're standing upright. And he sees that and he'll go right towards her to start posturing over her. She usually doesn't let it last too long. A lot of times she'll kind of work her way into a standing position, and then kind of posture right back to him with either a snap or a growl, sometimes a chin rest, but definitely very, very opportunistic when it comes to social status. But yeah.
Thanks. There's a lot of questions. I'm gonna
I
try
know, I
to.
was gonna say, I was like, oh.
This is great. Those are really great questions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Matthew asked if the wolves showed different forms of affection in their pack, and
Mm.
we talked briefly a little bit about some examples, or you did, Abby. But yeah, there's different forms. I don't know if affection maybe we can call like social bonding behaviors or just social behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yes, we see even I've seen personally some grooming behaviors from Grayson to the yearlings and the yearlings to Grayson, and between them, grooming in many animals, and in general, not all, but a lot of social animals, grooming is a very important form of bonding and like strengthening relationships. So that's one thing I've witnessed a lot. Um, Again, that resting is another indicator of those relationships as well. Um, so yeah, just that example I can give. I'm gonna try to get through some other questions though. Um, so yeah, when the wolf got sprayed by the skunk, how did the other wolves act around it? And what do you do about the odor, or does it go away over time? So those of you who don't know, it was what? It was in October, I think,
I think
probably
thereabouts,
like
yeah.
mid-October or so. A skunk came into the enclosure and Kaz was the first to get to it, to notice, and he went right at it, and the skunk sprayed him right in the face. Um, the skunk then went into hiding, and they stalked this skunk for a couple hours, 2, 3 hours, until he came out of, or the skunk came out of hiding, and then um, they all attacked, um, and the skunk didn't make. But to your question, everybody was doing a lot of face swiping, a lot of scent rolling. Kaz, when he got sprayed, and wolves that were around, they were sneezing a lot and trying to
Mhm.
like clean up their eyes, and they were probably all very uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, and there was a lot of interest, right? There's a lot of predatory behavior behind it. Um, Even though, they have enough food and all that, they are very interested in whatever's moving, and they haven't really seen inside the enclosure before. So, um, yeah, the wolves were. I observed the footage trying to find the moment that the skunk came in, and yeah, they stalked that skunk, almost all of them. They kept just sitting in front of the rock, and that was very persistent, and it was for about 3 hours until it came out, and
Mhm.
they all were surrounding it, and then Blackstone, I think, was eventually who did the final. So yeah, the odor, we didn't really do anything in the enclosure or anything for the
Mhm.
wolves. It's almost impossible, or I think there's ways, like if your dog gets sprayed, I know there's things to do out there. Um, with There's different solutions, but with the wolves, we really couldn't do anything. So we just kind of got that same smell every day. And at the lab and in the building, that smell really seeped through all
Mhm.
of our facilities. So if you got to visit around that time, you got to experience that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think the wolves cared as much as the people did. The wolves seemed to be all right. Well, this is how
Right.
I smell like now.
That's cool.
Um, for a couple weeks after, they seemed pretty. I know proud isn't a wolf term, but I don't know, a lot of high tails during that time. So they
Mhm,
must have
mhm.
felt pretty good with that fun
Oh
smell
yeah,
on them. Um,
absolutely.
you know. I see
Um,
another question here about um, since wolves get more than enough food in captivity, why do they still fight over food when it's all around them? That's a really good question. Um, wolves are, they're wild animals. That's kind of ingrained in their instincts to be trying to fight for survival, basically. So all of these behaviors that wolves have and all of these kind of social dynamics that wolves have um, are all for survival. Um, and that's not something that just goes away just because you are in a more captive setting. Um, so even some of you who have dogs, in theory, a lot of that wild instinct and kind of need to seek certain things for survival has been bred out of them over generations and generations. And as their DNA changes and their brain chemistry changes, a lot of that behavior is just not there anymore. But with these guys, they don't have that years and years of selective breeding to kind of um, breed that out of them. Um, and then they also, I mean, you may have also noticed that your dogs, even with that kind of selective breeding, some of them are very food possessive or very toy possessive, or even possessive of people. So a lot of times it's just not something that is going to go away. That's part of their species. That's part of their genetic code is, um, wanting to survive, especially when it comes to things like food. Um, Even though these guys, get very regular feedings and do not go, hungry, basically, um, they in their minds they don't know that for sure. That could be the last big meal that they're offered in their heads. They can't always rely on humans because that's not what they're used to, I guess, in their wild nature. They're still very much wild animals, even though they are in this kind of more, under the care of humans type situation. So I think that's a really good question, and I'm sure there's a lot of really interesting papers on that, but um Yeah, I guess that would be my take on that.
Yeah, that's those are some really good points, and we don't know everything, but yeah, if we find any resources that could help answer these questions, we can always share them with you next time, or with the archive. Um, I would say maybe this one last question because I think it is important, and we did talk a little bit about it earlier. Abby did. I just wanted to highlight the extraordinary success story of the Axel situation. How do you both feel about it? Were you confident the actions Wolfcare took would work? How do you see things going forward? I I think I can speak for the whole team that we're very relieved and we're really happy to see how it all turned out.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge with it, and I want to say, obviously you get the simplified version or the short version of how it all went down, right? Diagnosis, treatment plan, and then he's back to like being healthy hair, healthy skin. It
Mm-hmm.
was such a long process of weighing out every decision we made and discussing what were the costs and benefits. There was a lot of research done. Even before we had the diagnosis, when we didn't know what was happening, we were doing so much research. Abby was even able to identify all that before we had confirmation of it. Um, and then consulting with specialists all over.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a long process of doing research, consultations, and talking about it as a team and weighing all of the factors to be able to like, all right, this is what we're gonna do. And one of the biggest challenges is that this disease is not recorded. There's no cases recorded or reported on wolves before. So a lot of what we based it off of was domestic dogs, and that's what the veterinary like records had. And we could kind of adjust that to the weight and to other things and make sure that it aligns with his needs as a wolf living in a pack. So there was a lot of a long process, and I do feel that we made good decisions, and but yeah, there was still that, all right, what's going to happen? We this is a new case, and moving forward, um, we still, we are very happy, and I think like there's no reason to think that the treatment will stop working unless we change anything. But there's still the question of now, as we transition out of winter into the summer when they shed, how is that shed going to look like? That's the next question we have. And like with managing wolves up here in Minnesota and almost in everywhere, you have that seasonality question of like, there's so many things that we have to take into account. So, but I think we are very, very pleased and very relieved and very happy
Mm-hmm.
for him. And I don't want to speak for Abby, but you feel free to add whatever you think. So thanks for this question. And
Mm-hmm.
there'll be a piece in, if you get the Rendezvous and in the International Wolf magazine, that you can read more about it too. So hopefully that answered that. But
Yeah, beautifully put.
honestly, there's only just one more, and I think we can just call it because we're over time. But this is a question that maybe we'll have to. I don't know. I will have to look into it. Can the wolves see the aurora borealis?
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
I am not sure. Just judging by the cones that I know that they have, yeah, not sure. I would be just guessing. So I don't know, Abby, but we can always find some answers
Sure.
out on the web.
I would assume they would at least be able to see the light that it
Hmm.
produces because it definitely produces light. And I mean you can see it reflect off of the snow, on a night where it's
Hmm.
clear and the northern lights are out, everything's lit up. You can see
Right.
where you're walking because it's so bright.
Hmm.
Depending on the intensity of it, of course.
So
Um,
at least some form of it they are seeing,
Right.
right?
I would imagine it's probably similar, like light levels, to having the moon out. It
Mhm.
definitely makes the forest brighter because they have that extra source of light. So the colors I'm not 100% sure on,
Yeah.
but I would assume they would probably be able to see that light
Yeah.
source
Yeah.
at least. But
Yeah,
that's
these
some
were
interesting
all very
questions.
good questions, very cool
Yeah.
questions. Thank you all so much for
Mhm.
coming in and joining us and for all your wonderful questions. Just a
Mhm.
quick reminder, we have our next webinar December 21st, I believe at 4 p.m. So if you are not subscribed, feel free to register for that in the next following weeks, and we'll see you then. And thank you so much.